evil is evil. Whether it is lesser, greater, or middling, it makes no difference. The degree of evil is arbitrary and the definition is blurred. If I had to choose between one evil and another, I would rather not choose at all. These are the words of Sapkowski. In today's world, we often justify evil deeds because they don't directly affect us and happen far away from us. However, imagine if evil came to our doorstep, demanded our backyard, and killed our children, parents, siblings, and loved ones. What would we do then? Understandably, our country may not be perfect, our leaders may be corrupt, and our system may fail common people. But when we view someone as evil, who has attacked their neighbors and recently closest nation, genetically, historically, ethnically, and in language, only because of his inflated ego, we should question our own morality if we justify those actions. Appearances can be deceiving. While he may come across as a strong and charismatic leader who openly discusses the conspiracies that we all fear, the reality is that he is just as bad, if not worse, than his predecessors. He is skilled at manipulating and influencing others, and he uses his charming demeanor to justify his actions, even if they are unethical or morally wrong. He often distorts historical accounts to suit his own agenda and will never admit to any wrongdoing. It's crucial to see through his facade and hold him accountable for his actions. Although he projects an image of strength and confidence, the reality is quite different. The truth is that he is a small, timid elf who is scared of his own shadow. Despite his desire to be taller, stronger, and more intelligent, he suffers from a severe Napoleon complex, although even Napoleon himself would tower over him. The elf ruler of the kingdom possesses an enormous landmass and has access to abundant natural resources. However, despite the wealth and prosperity that these resources should bring, the vast majority of the population lives in poverty and destitution. This is largely due to the ruler's actions, as he and his closest allies have appropriated the kingdom's riches for themselves, leaving the general population to suffer. To maintain his grip on power, the elf employs a strategy of scapegoating whenever the people rise against his rule. He will often find an external enemy to blame for the country's problems, orchestrate a fake terror attack as a distraction, or even launch an attack on a neighboring state. These tactics serve to divert attention away from his failings and mismanagement and to preserve his position of power. In this way, he can avoid taking responsibility for the poverty and suffering that plague his people, instead pointing the finger elsewhere. It's quite amusing to observe how he consistently fails to tell the truth. He often makes grand promises of prosperity, equality, and democracy, only to forget about them later. Despite not delivering on a single promise, he goes on to claim that the present is far superior to the past. However, at the same time, he praises previous historical events that have occurred in his kingdom. It's difficult to determine his true stance on the matter, as he often shifts his narrative to fit his current mental state or mood. Sometimes, he blames his predecessors for the current state of affairs, while at other times, he praises them. It's uncertain whether he is delusional and believes his own lies or simply erratic and unable to come to terms with his kingdom's past. In a recent turn of events, he launched a daring campaign against his neighboring kingdom, citing the infiltration of so-called orcs as the reason for his actions. He boldly claimed that his neighbor was being manipulated by outside forces who were pushing immoral and corrupt narratives. According to him, it was only a matter of time before these forces attacked his own kingdom if he didn't take action. It was like watching an epic battle unfold between two brothers, with one defending his love interest and the other fighting to protect his honor. The stakes are high, and the tension is palpable as the fate of two nations hung in the balance. The leader in question initiated an attack on the neighboring nation, displaying an unwavering confidence in his ability to defeat them within a week or so. However, the war has been ongoing for several years now, despite the leader having access to superior forces, more people, and greater resources. Despite being on the losing side of the war, the leader still manages to hold his nation in his grasp having resorted to killing those who opposed him within his kingdom and imprisoning many others. This has created an atmosphere of fear and oppression within the kingdom, with many living in constant trepidation of the leader's wrath. Beware of the kingdom ruled by a paranoid tyrant. No one, not even his closest allies, is safe from his wrath. If he suspects any wrongdoing, he will stop at nothing to make you disappear. Many of his former allies have already fallen victim to his paranoia, some imprisoned, and others simply vanished. It's a dangerous game to be his ally, where safety is a luxury no one can afford. Can you imagine living in constant fear of being the next target? The stakes are high, and the danger is real in this treacherous kingdom. In a distant land, the once great kingdom was now in shambles. The ruler's tyranny had driven away the kingdom's best and brightest individuals, including highly qualified scientists and intellectuals who valued their dignity over their wealth. They chose to flee the kingdom and seek freedom elsewhere. Those who stayed behind were left with no choice but to either sell their souls to the ruling elf or resign themselves to living a life of despair and hopelessness. Despite the ongoing war and the kingdom's reputation being tarnished, a few brave souls still tried to live normal lives, enduring the hatred and blame of almost everyone outside Little Elf's kingdom. Little Elf finds himself in a position where he must convince his people of the imminent danger that looms outside their kingdom. He exerts all his effort to convince them that his misfortunes are not of his own doing, but rather the result of a great evil that is conspiring against them. He lays the blame squarely at the feet of the orcs, who he claims are a coalition of immoral beings that love vulgarity and depravity. He stresses that the war he has started is not just against their neighboring kingdom, but also against the orcs, who seek to destroy all that is good in the world. He sees himself as a savior, a messiah who must defend the last moral castle in the world. Despite the corruption and dysfunction that is prevalent in his own kingdom, Little Elf remains steadfast in his resolve to fight. He acknowledges that his military is ill-equipped to handle the task at hand, yet he still believes that victory is possible with the help of Pooh's kingdom. He is aware of the fact that the orcs have a significant advantage in terms of resources and military equipment, but he remains undeterred. He is determined to fight until the end, even if it means purchasing military equipment from the poorest dictatorships around the world. In times of peril, Little Elf displays remarkable bravery. When danger approaches, he retreats to his underground lair, leaving his people and closest allies behind. Meanwhile, his enemy king wages war against Little Elf's forces in his own capital. From the safety of his hidden command center, Little Elf directs his troops with cunning strategy and unwavering courage. Only when the danger has passed does he emerge from his underground lair and take his rightful place in the most luxurious castle in the world. There, surrounded by opulence and comfort, he continues to lead his people with the same bravery that earned him their devotion and respect. Betrayal can be a bitter pill to swallow, especially when it comes from those you trust the most. Our Little Elf knows this all too well. When he feels betrayed, he retreats to his underground lair and waits for his loyal forces to deal with the traitor. But that's not the end of it. Our elf is an ex-spy, and he knows how to get revenge in the most effective way possible. He strikes when nobody sees it coming, and the traitors pay with their lives. Revenge is best served cold, after all. So if you ever cross our elf, beware. He won't forget, and he won't forgive. Have you ever heard of the power of a poison? It seems that our Little Elf knows all about it. Despite facing activists and all types of enemies, he found that poisoning was the most effective way to deal with them. Can you believe it? He even poisoned his most hated enemy. But wait, it gets even stranger. He then imprisoned him and killed him there because that bastard survived poisoning. How bizarre. But when questioned about it, the Little Elf claimed that he had nothing to do with his opponent's demise. According to him, they just die themselves. He even went on to say that everyone is bad except for him and his closest friends, who happen to be the richest people in the world because of him. Talk about a generous leader. What do you think of this peculiar little elf and his unique approach to dealing with enemies? Let's consider a scenario where our world is plagued with chaos. Let's assume that the most powerful country is under the control of nefarious individuals who indulge in abhorrent practices, such as sacrificing innocent children daily. Let's also assume that every conspiracy theory we have ever heard of is indeed true, which is of course hilarious to consider. But in such a world, is the alternative an egomaniac little elf and an Eastern pooh who makes his people his slaves? It's worth asking ourselves, do we really need those alternatives? Let's take a moment to reflect on that.